Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the public safety meeting. I'll turn it over to Council Member Kinnear, but I first have to say I'm super happy to see Council Member Stratton looking at me from the screen. Thanks, Karen.
Thank you. I too am happy to see Councilmember Stratton. So hope you're feeling a lot better, and it's great to see you. I'm sure it's great to be seen too, right? Yeah.
I'm not sure about that yet, but I'm working on it.
Okay, keep working. So first item of business is welcome, and we need a motion to approve the minutes for February.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, aye.
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 Opposed, nay? Any abstentions? Okay, we're good. And first item of business is we're going to be moving the consent number 8 to urban experience per the request of Council President Beggs. So urban experiences when again, Council President?
Next week on the 8th.
Okay, good. So we'll wait 1 week and then we'll hear the debate on that. And then next we have Sergeant Sparing will give us an update on canines.
And I'm here if you can hear me.
We can hear you. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. So February 2021, we had 73 deployments, 24 people located or captures, and we did have 1 contact. So that's 4.16 for a bite ratio for the month of February. That brings our total bite ratio for the year to 3.12. That's a total of 2 contacts for this year. Capture of the month goes to Officer Buckman and his canine partner, Trace. I don't know if you heard in the news, a citizen chasing some robbery suspects from his house with firearms up at the Shadle area is where they ended up crashing out. So there were shots fired in that between the citizen and the suspects involved. Trace and Buckman responded up there, located an AK-47 wrapped in a piece of clothing in front of the car, tracked for 0.94 miles from Shadle around quite a ways to Glover Middle School, which is under construction in a new construction area there, where they located 2 suspects and found a stolen handgun from Missoula laying underneath a shipping container where the suspects were located. So obviously no snow on the ground or anything like that. It was a perfect example of our dogs being able to help us locate these guys. They went to jail for first-degree robbery, possession of stolen handguns, and drive-by shooting as well. So any questions for me?
Any questions? So which was the officer's name and which was the dog's name?
This is Officer Paul Buckman.
Okay.
And Paul just received his master trainer status from Washington State Police Canine Association. So we're pretty proud of him. He's been a canine handler for over 7 years. His canine partner is Trace.
Trace, okay.
Yep.
Well, names are almost interchangeable, so okay.
Thank you much for your time.
Thank you. Chief Meidel, you are up next.
Good afternoon.
2020 stats overview.
Yes, let me see if I can get to sharing the file. There we go. So thank you for giving me 15 minutes. I'll go through this fairly quickly. I just wanted to review last year's crime stats with you. Crime Analysis put together a PowerPoint, and I'll go through them fairly quickly. That's not what I wanted. But if there's any questions or you want me to stop and get into more detail, I'm happy to do that. So every one of these websites between WebEx and Zoom is a different format. And just when I think I got it figured out, I get to a different one. So give me 1 second here, just looking for my PowerPoint.
Councilmember Burke could probably tell you exactly what to do.
It should be. It's not like,
Oh my gosh, you're funny, Lori.
here we go. Okay, and can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So again, this is comparing 2019 to 2020. Everyone knows last year was a very unusual year with COVID, really across the nation, and Spokane was no different in terms of the challenges we saw, as well as some of the trends. So just the variables that were impacting the crime for last year. One of the things that we know is when you look at crime trends, looking year to year can be somewhat dangerous, just because we know crimes ebb and flow, they spike and they plateau, et cetera, et cetera. So you really want to look at the trend line over the long haul. And then as our crime analyst pointed out, with the COVID-19 lockdowns, we had a lot of businesses shut down. So you'll notice when we get through this that a lot of our larcenies, the shopliftings and thefts were down fairly significantly, with the bars being closed as well, especially in the downtown area. That can lead to some other issues that we just simply didn't have because the bars were closed as well. And those are just kind of the 30,000 foot level. Some of the things that we did, though, to try to make sure that we were keeping the businesses that were closed safe is we had proactive patrol. We call them missions. Missions, I covered this very briefly last year. Missions is really a strategy that we took from LAPD. It's kind of an evolution of hotspot policing. Instead of hotspot policing being where you follow on a heat map of crime, you'll assign officers there for anywhere from a couple days to a week until that heat spot goes away, and then you move on to the next. Missions are more long-term focused. Just because the problem goes away doesn't mean you necessarily move on, because you don't want it coming back right away. So we assigned business areas to our missions, had some pretty good successes of officers working the missions and interrupting some burglaries of buildings as well. We obviously have our domestic violence unit. This is where we actually have officers assigned to the YWCA. We have a sergeant, several detectives, and several patrol officers that are proactive as well, and going out and doing follow-up where the suspect in the domestic violence was in contact the night before. They'll contact the suspect while he's in jail, talking about what that means, the no contact, anger management courses, really trying to offer them services as well, while also comforting the victim. And that's what the domestic violence will do. You're all very familiar with our behavioral health unit. And then we continued last year to really focus one of our police anti-crime teams on getting our vehicle thefts down. And we were in the top 10 for quite a while nationally. And again, that's the metropolitan area of Spokane, not just the city of Spokane. So we have some great successes with our police anti-crime team in driving down those vehicle thefts as well. So here's, again, 2019 compared to 2020. You look at violent crime on the left, property crime is on the right. Obviously, homicides took a rather large spike last year. Again, that was a national trend we saw as well, and we'll get into that in just a few minutes here as well. So homicides were up. When you're looking at the numbers, this number that says 20 for 2020 should actually be should be 21 now due to one of the homicides. With further investigation, our investigators determined it was actually a homicide as well. And then over on the right side, you can see just some news clips nationally of what we're seeing, including in Washington State as well. So we have a very good solve rate on homicides here. A lot of areas, if you see that 60 to 70% mark, that's considered pretty good. The majority of our homicides are typically solved. Sometimes we know who committed a homicide, but knowing who did it and being able to prove who did it can sometimes be two different things as well. But this was a trend that we saw across the entire nation. Drive-bys, that's been in the news lately. 2021 has started off with a rather large increase in drive-bys as well. There's when you're looking on the pie chart on the right, you'll see the breakdown of the motivation for those drive-bys, everything from gang-related, gang ties, drugs, domestic violence. One partner is angry at the other partner for breaking up with him, et cetera, et cetera. And then on the left, it breaks down the drive-bys year to year. The drive-bys are in blue on the left. The other calls, so it's not uncommon we'll get calls of shots heard in the area of X. Officers will respond to the area, and they may not locate anything at all that would indicate there was actually a shooting. Doesn't mean there wasn't one. They just don't find any shell casings or any kind of evidence that proved there was. And other times, they will locate shell casings as well. So that gives you a pretty good breakdown of where 2020 was compared to prior years as well. Sexual assaults were down fairly significantly last year. You'll start to notice September, October of last year, they started to trend up a little bit. With a lot of the restaurants being closed, the bars being closed. Not all, we don't typically, it does happen, but we don't typically have the woman walking down the street who gets pulled in the bushes. That does happen. It's typically fairly rare. It's typically someone that someone else met, and then at some point during that engagement, sexual assault occurs as well. So with a lot of the restaurants and bars being closed, you didn't see people out as much socializing. I think that really impacted our rapes being down 14% as well. Commercial robberies down again. A lot of the businesses were closed. Pretty self-explanatory on that. And you're just looking at the trend line on the left. Yellow is 2019. The gray is 2020. So those were trending down as well with all the businesses being closed. And you look at the trend line from 2017, even up through 2020, we've been trending down as well. Robberies were down, not significantly, less than 1%. The robberies were down, and that's something that is trending ever so slightly up, negligibly up, but again, not a significant impact when it comes to our robberies. Aggravated assault, non-domestic violence, those are really going to be your felonious assaults. Again, as you're looking at the trend line, you'll notice around March is when we got the stay-home orders from Governor Inslee, and you can see that for the most part we trend down, and then again in August, a little peak in August, and those continued to trend down. But from 2017 to 2020, again, still a positive trend line in terms of driving down those numbers as well for aggravated assaults. Domestic violence. Now, I need to add the caveat because we know in some areas of the nation, they have seen an increase in domestic violence. Here, if I were going to add anything to the aggravated assault domestic violence, I would add this is reported. This is reported domestic violence, aggravated assaults. With the kids staying home, with some people being out of work, a lot more people being stuck at home, logic would say that there's probably a lot more of an environment for conflict to occur, and there may be more conflict, whether that is people not reporting because the economy was in a recession, people worried about homes and foods and where they're going to take care of their kids, so they weren't reporting them. Again, so I look at this number with a little bit of caution as well. And then this is the misdemeanor assault domestic violence is down 7% last year compared to 2019 as well. And again, I would add that caution that this is reported simple assault domestic violence. And then these are calls for service. It breaks it down again. Yellow is going to be 2019, and then the gray is going to be 2020. You see, as the year progressed, when we compare the months of 19 to 20, you do start to see a little bit of an uptick in those numbers as well. My sense is that, again, being very careful not to establish any kind of theory on just a 2-year comparison. You know, people may have been getting tired of that staying at home as much and not having an outlet to go out and recreate and hang out as much as they had in the past. So again, with our domestic violence unit, it is, as it says there at the bottom bullet, focused deterrence on our offenders and also focused assistance for our victims, going out and talking with them, offering them resources. A lot of times we know domestic violence victims may stay with the person who's abused them because they have nowhere else to go, or they don't know anywhere else that they can go, or there's children involved, they're worried about custody issues. One of the tools we've used here for multiple years now is the lethality assessment protocol, which is basically a chart where the officer at the time they're taking the report will ask them different questions from, has the person ever threatened you? Have they ever choked you? Are you afraid of this person? And then based on the scoring of that tool, which was developed through some research, if they score high enough, if they score enough points, they will definitely be referred immediately to a victim advocate. And we'll refer all of them to a victim advocate, but we really do try to encourage them, depending on how they answer that LAP card, we call it. The Firearms Technical Assistance Project as well, trying to get firearms away from people who have been charged with domestic violence. It sounds very easy to do, but you have to, one, know that they have weapons, you then have to get them to give you the weapons. And it's not uncommon that we're fairly successful in getting the weapons per the court order from those who've been charged with domestic violence, but we'll also sometimes be told, no, I gave those to John Doe, whoever John Doe is. So sometimes they're telling us they don't have those weapons. And then one of the programs we're really starting to get into is a Handle with Care program. This is a program that's actually in different jurisdictions across the nation. And it really is about notifying the school of one of their students who may have been involved in even witnessing a domestic violence as well, so that the school can be mindful of that when the student returns to class, if the student needs extra counseling, if they need some help, if there's maybe some behavioral issues, at least the school is aware of that and can kind of wrap around some services with them. Obviously, with schools being shut down last year, that wasn't really able to get off the ground to the extent that we would like it to. And again, this is just some more information on domestic violence. We know that in a typical year, it is underreported. Some figures, as much as 50% of domestic violence is not reported as well. Property crime, burglaries were down 7%. I actually would have thought that would have been more with people staying home from work and businesses being closed, but it was a 7% decline. And again, if you look at on the right, 17 to 2020, the trend is going down in that area as well. Commercial burglaries. Now, some of the commercial burglaries will include if a shoplifter goes into a store, let's say Walmart, and shoplifts, Walmart will arrest that person from the store and say, you are no longer welcome in our store. You come in here and you steal, you can't come back. It's not uncommon that we'll see some of our repeat offenders go back to the store and shoplift again. Because they've been trespassed, they're entering the building unlawfully, and that makes it then technically a burglary. And because they've been trespassed, they're going back in there illegally. You'll see that they're typically caught again shoplifting as well. So some of those commercial burglaries will be shopliftings as well. And again, one of the things we focused on was trying to assign our missions to the plazas where a lot of these buildings were shut down during COVID. And this just talks about we anticipated with business closures, especially 24/7, middle of the night, that we may see an increase in some burglaries. So we did try to track where these were occurring. Vehicle theft. We've been focused on our vehicle theft for about 4 years now. My goal when we first started this about 4 years ago was let's start out by saying let's get out of the top 100 for the nation. So going from the top 10 to getting out of the top 100, we're waiting for the traffic safety. I'm trying to remember what it's called. I believe it's the Traffic Safety Commission, or it might be the. Hey McNabb, do you remember what that organization is called? The National Transportation Safety Board or Insurance Board, something like that.
The one that we did a grant through?
No, that where we get our data from about being ranked nationally. Do you remember off the top of your head?
I don't, but I do think it's the National Transportation Safety Board. I think you're right on that.
Okay.
Actually, the National Auto Theft Bureau.
Okay.
NATB.
So we'll use that to try to gauge where we're at, and looking forward to seeing where we are in 2020 compared to 2019 as well.
Hey, Chief.
Yes.
Candace Mum here. Hey, I just, on the property crime and the vehicle theft, I know you and I and others worked on the supervision bill that was passed a year ago. It may be too soon to tell, but any thoughts?
So in talking with Sergeant Vigasa, who oversees our police anti-crime team focused on vehicle theft, it's just not a tool being used a whole lot right now by the prosecutors. And I'm not sure why that is. I'll try to get some more research from him and some updated information from you. But in the conversations I had with him, it sounds like it's just something that's not being offered a whole lot. So let me get some info, and I'll get back to the whole council on that. Let the whole council know.
I would add that we worked 3 years on that.
Yeah.
So for goodness sake, I would hope that tool would be used, because it was tough trying to get that through. And we got a lot of resistance, and I'm hoping that you give us some good news when you talk to the powers that be.
And if they're not using it, we need to have some conversations, because they were at the table with us about that eventually, thanks to a lot of your efforts. And, we're supposed to be a pilot on this. So it's a big deal. And I know we could maybe ask for some grace period with COVID, but we've got to use it to show how well it works.
Right, absolutely. And, you know, I remember our conversation was this could have implications for other charges as well if this is effective. Again, larceny, this is going to be basically your thefts. With a lot of the businesses being closed, we anticipated this would go down. Now, some stores that were open saw a huge spike in shoplifting, but with the majority being closed, the overall trend is down. And if you look again from 17 to 2020, the year-long trend has been down as well. So I'd be careful about that on the right side. The pickpocketing, those are usually very low numbers as well. But just looking at the breakdown of larceny categories on the right there, you can see where the decreases are. Shoplifting will be a big part of that. But we've had some crazy larcenies. When I was the captain up north, I remember getting a report. I read all the property crime reports when I was the north captain that came in, and one was a woman who had just planted some shrubs. Woke up the next morning, her shrubs were gone. That was a larceny. It's someone dug up her bushes while she was sleeping. So larcenies run the full gamut from shoplifting to things sitting on people's porches to sometimes even shrubbery. And this just talks about, so when we started the COVID, we know we did an early release. The state early released some of the folks that were under supervision as well. So we wanted to try to monitor that. And what we did note that was 104 from the Spokane area were released that had a local history in Spokane. So folks that were released early, it could be anywhere from a month to several months. 104 of them had Spokane as their area of residence. 83 of those were in other jurisdictions that had a history in Spokane. Doesn't mean they lived here per se, but they did have a history in Spokane. So we wanted to measure the known impacts of the 104 individuals from Spokane that were released. About half of them had a new activity locally during the remainder of the 2020 year. And then you'll see there that 13 of the 83 that weren't necessarily from here but had ties here had new activity here as well. And this just gives you a breakdown. We redacted the names, but on the left side, you'll see the bar chart. That is a breakdown of individuals saying every single line is an individual name that had some kind of contact after they were released. On the right side, you'll see that row breaks down what those contacts were in more detail. So the 42 arrests that we made here, 24 were felonies, 16 were gross misdemeanor, 25 unique individuals as well. We had obviously some warrant arrests, a few crimes of violence as well, and then some traffic. So the local jail here, it's much harder to track those. That's just based on some systems. I know the jail is looking at updating some of their software as well, but we did try to track locally as well. That was a lot more challenging for us. So that was very quick. I only had 15 minutes, but I'm happy to answer any questions, and I will absolutely get back on the vehicle theft program as well.
Thank you. Any questions for the chief? I can't see you all, so you might just speak up.
Chief, this is Councilmember Cathcart. I'm just wondering, I've had some folks ask me about the state of the pod and how enforcement is going with the pod and what that might be looking like as we move forward into 21. Just wondering if you have any updates or thoughts.
Yeah, we obviously the number one hurdle, from what my staff has told me, the number one hurdle is having enough shelter space during the daytime. So at nighttime, especially as it's been getting very cold, bitter cold at night, the shelters more often than not are at full capacity. But during the daytime, again, my understanding is we just don't have that daytime shelter capacity, which makes enforcement obviously problematic and something that we can't do. So what we have done, because I know you all are in the same situation we are, we get complaints when we don't do anything from community, and then we get complaints when we do something from community. So when you see our officers that are out there, what we've been asked to do is go with code enforcement and help them clean up around these areas. A lot of these areas are just magnets for garbage and debris. There's a cleaning effort last week where the officers reported there was mice and body waste, fecal matter. So they go and they'll clean up around this area, but there's no actual enforcement action taken. And so right now when you see us out there, typically because there is no shelter space, very seldom are we going to be doing any enforcement right now. And Eric oversees the precincts as well. Eric, anything you'd like to add to that?
I think you handled it pretty well. We are also looking at what criminal options are, if any, that would be necessitated to assist with the cleanup, just pure cleanup, not having to do with the homeless encampments or homeless and unsheltered violations.
And just for confirmation, Eric, you thought I handled it pretty well. And really what you should have said is I handled that very well. So why don't you go and find a captain's opening that you can slide down into. And I'm sorry that you all had to see that. It's very uncomfortable.
Okay. So, Councilmember Wilkerson, go ahead.
Thank you. So, Chief, with the early release during COVID, will there be any follow-up on those numbers since you really couldn't quantify if they really led to more crime or decreasing crime? Because, like your presentation said, many felt like that it didn't have an impact on crime in the community. So, until we see something that said that it did, we will all just continue to speculate. So, any further thoughts on how to quantify if it was an impact or not an impact on crime with the COVID release?
So yeah, there was an impact when you look at the breakdown. And I'm sorry, I closed it out so that we could see one another. There was an impact in terms of what that impact was. I'll forward that slide to you again, so you can see what it was. But about half of those that were released were contacted at some level. Some of them were traffic-related citations, suspended. Some of them would have been some crimes of violence like robberies and things like that. But the robberies obviously would have been on the low end. But if I recall correctly, and forgive me, it's been probably 9 months since I've read what the release conditions were going to be. Some of them were released a month or two early. They would have been out at some point during COVID anyways, and others were, I want to say, up to no more than 6 months. So a lot of these folks would have been released at some point last year anyways. They were just released earlier.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the chief? Okay, I have two. Councilmember Wilkerson and I had some discussion about gang violence, and I asked her if she thought that the folks that were perpetuating this were new to our area, and she answered in the affirmative. And I'm wondering if that's something that you can corroborate, or is there any way to know if these are new people coming into our area that are committing crimes because they see an opportunity, or is it something that we just can't know?
I'll ask Major McNabb to get into some details on that. One of the challenges we're having with the drive-bys, though, is really a lack of cooperation from the victims or the witnesses as well. For probably a number of reasons, and this isn't uncommon. This is seen across the nation where, for a number of reasons, they're not telling us either A, who did it, or B, who they think did it, so they can at least point us in the right direction as well. So what we're doing is we're being very proactive in trying to work with the family members of those that we believe may be involved, and trying to coordinate with them to try to get, a lot of times you're seeing that these are going to be younger folks that are involved in this, trying to work with some of our community leaders as well. But I do know that the majority of the ones that I'm aware of are not from outside the area. That's my understanding. But Mike, do you have anything you wanted to add on that?
Yeah, we don't have any indication that they're from outside the area coming in committing these crimes, but we do know that some travel to different states and are back and forth. We've seen that in the past, but what's really disturbing is the age of these offenders, and these victims are teens, much younger than you would expect, and that's been pretty troubling through this whole process.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So with the age being an issue, how is the gang task force changing their approach, or are they changing their approach of how they try to learn more and help mitigate some of those issues? This is the age issue, partially.
I think the chief really nailed it when he said that we're trying to engage with the community and the parents. Not to blame COVID for everything, but we're not having that school teacher-student involvement that we normally would. We're not having those small interactions, small interventions that occur at school. And so maybe the kids have more time on their hands than before, but nevertheless, they're getting themselves into something. What we are changing, without getting into a lot of specifics, because we are knee-deep in these investigations right now, is that we are throwing as many resources as we can at this, and we are looking at this from all angles, and that includes community engagement.
Go ahead, Councilmember Cathcart, and then Councilmember Mom.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, with the loss now of resource officers in our schools, has there been any conversations with the school districts to try and figure out an alternative to getting folks that can be, boots on the ground to identify some of the teens that are possibly getting into trouble or kind of on that pathway to getting into trouble? I feel like that's something that we're going to lose big time by losing those positions. I'm wondering if there's just been any conversations on a way to try to replace that.
So the schools are transitioning to their CROs, campus resource officers. They're transitioning to a different role, and they will be in the schools, but they're really, so for example, we used to give them what was called a limited commission. And what that means is that for certain crimes that were committed, they were given the authority to initiate charges if they so decided. So the CROs, and I can't remember what the name's going to be called of them, they changed the names as well. They'll still be there. And they're going to be, my sense is they're going to be more in that counseling role, and I'm way oversimplifying this, and I acknowledge that. But with schools being closed as well since really last summer in terms of what's been occurring with the drive-bys, they have not been in contact with us. And in fact, I found out last week that Friday was going to be the last day that they were going to allow their CROs to use limited commissions. So not really a whole lot of communication from them. We are going to meet with their new director they just hired tomorrow as well. So hopefully he'll have some more information for us.
Councilmember Mom, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to sort of go back in history a little bit. Many of you may remember when Chief Mangan was here and we had another influx of gang activity. And one of the things was sort of creating partnerships with portals. I remember the airports were key, and some other ways to maybe just sort of isolate the situation in our own community, where in the past Spokane, because of where it sits in a transportation hub, was getting a lot of influx from other communities as well. So I'm sure you're working hand in hand with the Tri-Cities and Idaho and Seattle. But I recall our community having sort of a surge of this at another time, and we had to sort of adapt to it. The other thing I wanted to mention was in terms of new gang activity, I'm sure the police department knows this, but they've shifted to human trafficking and because it's more lucrative. And so that's not what a lot of people think gang activity looks like, but it's impacting not just the gang members, but other students as well who are being recruited in our schools. And so if there's something we can do to expand that conversation with our schools to help prevent that and protect our children, I'm seeing some nodding heads there by the department, so maybe you can address that. But gang activity is different now than it was several decades ago.
Any other questions? I'm going to save my question for later because it's going to take too long to answer and we need to move on. But this has been a good discussion. And if there's anything else that Major McNabb or you, Chief, can add or need counsel to do, please let us know, because those are our constituents that are impacted, and we need to be partnering in mitigating this. The next person up is Maggie Yates on update on grant received from MacArthur Foundation Safety and Justice Challenge. And Maggie, I did send you one question from a constituent. If you wouldn't mind answering that as you go through your report, that'd be great.
Absolutely. I'll do my best. And I am trying to get my camera started. I'm not sure if you can see me or not, but I'll share my screen so you can at least see the presentation. Thank you.
But a shared screen would be great.
Okay, perfect. Can you all see the PowerPoint up now?
No.
Well, Captain Meidel is,
There it is.
Chief Meidel's in good company, rather.
Yep.
All right, perfect. Here we are. So thanks again for your time this afternoon. I'm here to just provide a brief overview of the recent grant award that we received from the MacArthur Foundation Safety and Justice Challenge. Some of you may be familiar with this grant. We have participated in the Safety and Justice Challenge as a region since 2015. This is our, I believe, 4th award that we've received from the foundation. It's a 2-year grant award for $700,000. And the Safety and Justice Challenge is really designed to support jurisdictions across the United States working to safely reduce their jail population, address racial and ethnic disparities across the criminal justice system, and increase community engagement. And this current round of funding is really for, in part, sustainability planning. We anticipate that this is likely going to be the last grant that we receive from the foundation, and they're really encouraging us to review our various projects and initiatives and plan for our future sustainability. The grant award is sort of managed by a core team that includes 2 representatives from the city prosecutor Justin Bingham and presiding municipal court judge, Judge Ann Tush. The portfolio of initiatives that I'm going to provide a quick overview of in just a moment was informed not only by the members of the core team, but also other systems actors and, importantly, community members. We held about 2 or 3 different remote hearings or public conversations during COVID-19 to finalize our strategies, and you'll see a lot of input from community members in the various portfolio reforms. I've broken this out into 2 different slides, one of continued strategies, so strategies we've also already deployed and will continue funding for the next 2 years or so, and then new strategies. So first up are continued strategies, which includes the funding of a data analyst. For her salary and benefits, you see that we have the first year fully funded, that's 2021. In 2022, that funding is being cut in half. And this is really the foundation encouraging us to seek more sustainable forms of funding so that we can absorb her full salary and benefits by the 3rd year or by 2023. Our data analyst, who's in my office, is responsible for constructing and maintaining the jail data dashboard, which some of you might have seen. If not, I'm happy to send you the link. But it is a public tool that allows individuals to interact with our jail data. You can filter it by race, gender, age, and date. And so that's been a critical tool to helping us better understand our system and our sort of refine our various initiatives and reforms. And she also provides analytics on an as-needed basis that has been, again, very critical to our work across the region. We started a criminal justice information hotline last year that serves as a centralized resource for individuals who have questions about upcoming court dates or matters in any of the 3 courts, municipal, district, and superior courts. And the hotline associates also make outgoing phone calls to provide court date reminders to individuals with upcoming court dates in district court. So right now we have 4 extra help hotline associates staffing the hotline. It's funded through the 1st year. We don't have funding in 2022. So if we want to continue that program or expand it to make outgoing calls for other courts as well, we'll need additional funding. And we are seeing, I should mention, some preliminary data that really supports the utility of this intervention. Individuals who we connect with on the phone have a higher rate of their hearings being held at their next court date, and they also face a lower rate of having a warrant issued at that next court date. So only 6% of individuals who actually speak with a hotline associate have a warrant issued in their next court date, compared to 20% of individuals who we have a non-working number for. UpTrust is the text message application that the county public defender uses to communicate with their clients and also send court date reminders. This is funded for 2021. Again, we'll have to seek additional funding or alternative funding, I should say, in 2022. The data dashboard is that jail dashboard I just mentioned, and that is fully funded through 2022. There's a license fee and some other software that's required to maintain and expand that. And then you just see some other grant expenses that are folded into the full amount. I'll move on to the new strategies if there are no questions at this point. And here's really where you see some input from community. So first of all, we have a new transportation initiative that is intended to create a partnership with a rideshare company so that we can provide free rides to individuals who have any sort of court-related appointment across any of the 3 courts, so including municipal court. That might be a court hearing, it could be a meeting with a public defender, a probation officer, or even an appointment for urinalysis testing. So we're at the beginning stages of planning for all of these new initiatives, but we are looking to launch them over the next year or 2. The cell phone initiative is also for all 3 courts, basically creating a fund and a process for providing free cell phones for low-income individuals who are court involved and don't have a cell phone. This is important not only because it's a way of getting those court date reminders and accessing the hotline, but also, of course, accessing different resources in the community and being able to appear for court remotely when that's a possibility, which we've seen come into play more and more over the course of the pandemic. Supported release is a pretrial release program, which I think many of you are familiar with, and Council President Beggs got to see this in action in New York last year, I believe. Basically, it creates an alternative for judges releasing individuals pretrial. So in addition to releasing on their own recognizance or releasing with conditions, this program offers an alternative where individuals can be released to voluntary services provided by case managers through a community-based organization. That we're really hoping to target those low-level bond amounts of individuals who might just have some factors of instability and make sure that they can be released from jail safely and successfully. Right now, this is just going to be piloted in district court. It's my understanding that municipal court is going to move in a slightly different direction, but we are happy to collaborate with them whenever possible as we sort of move forward, creating additional alternatives to pretrial release or pretrial incarceration. We also have funding for a racial equity toolkit, and this is going to be a user-friendly tool specific to the legal system that decision makers can use when they're making investment decisions or policy decisions. It's going to be a series of questions or prompts, sort of similar to Policy Partners at the Health District, if you're familiar with that, but specific to the legal system. And we're developing this in partnership with the Racial Equity Committee and Alex Jabalisco from the city, and only have it funded through 2021, but don't anticipate additional costs moving into 2022 because we hope to have it available and disseminated by that point. We also have a small amount of funding for micro grants. We are putting together a committee comprised of systems actors and community members to draft a request for proposal, to review applications, and then make those micro grant awards to community-based efforts to address some challenge or priority of the grant, I should say. So again, that's safely reducing the jail population, addressing racial disparities, and increasing community engagement. And then finally, we have a small amount set aside to work with a financial analyst in the second year of the grant so that we can better understand any financial savings that we've achieved through these various initiatives. And that will, we hope to use that to inform future funding decisions and our plans for sustainability. So that's a very brief overview. I'm happy to answer any questions, and again, really appreciate the opportunity to share the upcoming projects with the council.
Any questions for Maggie? I can't see you all, so Councilmember Wilkerson, go ahead.
So just a little bit more on the cell phone. So the state of Washington does provide free cell phones for low-income people. Is this a different economic bracket of people who you will be providing these cell phones for?
Thanks, Councilmember Wilkerson. The idea is to have cell phones available at court or with the public defender's office or the probation office, so that if a need for a cell phone is identified, we can have that programmed and ready to go right at that point of contact rather than having to redirect someone to then go get a cell phone. we have reached out to some of the providers under the program you're referring to and are still working through whether we can leverage a partnership there or if we need to secure additional cell phones. So it's really for anyone who's court involved who needs a cell phone.
Anybody else? So Maggie, could you address the question that I asked you earlier regarding caseloads, and let's see if I can get it back here.
Yes, Councilmember Kenner, I recall the question was about, I believe, caseloads for supportive release.
Yes, yes.
And we will determine the appropriate caseloads with a prior practice proposals to select their provider for supported release and then determine those case levels that are appropriate. In New York, we base the program on basically a caseload of about a case manager. And the case managers include clinicians, licensed clinicians, bachelor's level case managers, and then peer navigators as well.
Okay, good, thank you. Council President, you look like you need to say something? No? Okay, good. Anybody else? Maggie, thanks so much. We appreciate this overview. It's helpful. Next up is Mr. Njosi, and he's going to talk about, what are you going to talk about? Oh, reclassifying some positions for fire EMS to fire dispatch. That would be the SBO.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Kinnear and City Council members. So the item that we brought forward for discussion is an SBO that is dealing with a temporary reclassification of existing firefighter positions to a firefighter dispatch type position. And I can speak more to the economic side of it, to the financial side of it. I believe Chief Williams and Tanya are also on the line if they want to jump in on any of the operational impacts or changes. But as you read in the briefing paper, our interlocal agreement with SHREC expired this year. And in order to supplement some of the fire dispatch needs, the Guild and the Local 29 and the city worked together to come up with an agreement to temporarily reclassify 3 firefighter positions to firefighter dispatch positions from February 2021 through February 2022. The reason we're bringing the SBO forward is to centralize all of the dispatch expenses under the Combined Communications Center Fund, Department 1630. If you remember, during the budget adoption, three firefighter dispatch, just regular civilian dispatch positions were budgeted in 1625 in the Public Safety Personnel Levy Fund. But on the whole, 1630, the Combined Communications Center Fund is where all the civilian dispatch costs are accounted for and budgeted. So what the SBO would do is move those positions out of 1625 back into 1630. It would charge back, so there would be a transfer between those two funds, so no net change to that part of the budget. And then it would pick up these 3 temporary reclassifications, which are currently in the Fire EMS Fund in 1970, and also move them into 1630. So again, all of the dispatch costs, both civilian and now firefighter, would live under one roof in 1630. It just centralizes all the costs. And that's helpful for accounting for their needs and also for just general tracking of city dispatch costs. But so that's the piece I'm aware of. And as I mentioned, the experts on the line, I think, would be more than happy to answer any questions on the operational side.
Thank you. Council, have any questions?
I think Councilmember Mumm should make an announcement of the progress at the legislature today.
Well, before that, we have Councilmember.
I just have a quick question. So is this for three positions or 4 positions?
So the SBO deals with 6 positions in total moving back into 1630.
Okay.
3 of those are current. They just happen to be budgeted in 1625.
Okay.
And then 3 are the temporary reclassifications in Fire EMS.
Okay.
So the agreement between Local 29 and the city dealt with 3 firefighter positions. The SBO is just bringing all 6 back under one.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Mum, did you have an announcement?
Do you want me to talk about what happened in the legislature today?
Let's hold it off till the end, if that's okay, because we have a little piece in there for legislative report. So can you, thank you. Paul, thank you very much. That was helpful. And we're going to move on to Tanya, who's going to talk about police fleet analysis and financial financial projections. Tanya, take it away.
Lori, did Council President Beggs have a question during that little confusion? No? Okay.
Oh, he was talking for Councilmember Mum.
Good afternoon, City Council. This is about page 90 of your packet, and I'm going to share. You will also see Major McNabb. I hope he's still on.
I'm here.
Okay, in 10 minutes, we're going to cover as much as we can. There is really no approval or anything of that sort that we're asking for of the City Council at this time. We really wanted to share some information with you. The police department has, over the last 2 months, January and February, in light of what has happened over in the fall when we were talking about the electric vehicles, we thought it very important to really take a thorough review of the police fleet overall. So we're bringing back to you a scrubbed down version, and it's really acclimate you and bring some awareness about what is happening with the police fleet and how their vehicles are being used. Again, there are a lot of great questions over the fall and in late summer. So this first slide right here is based on a scrubbed down 2-month review that the police department did. In total, there are 426 vehicles in their fleet. And you can see through here, there's specialty vehicles, undercover vehicles, some vehicles that are used in the training department. There's also some motorcycles. And based on the review of all of those, 11 vehicles are now slated for decommissioning. So these are very old vehicles that are not being used for one purpose or another. And so that will be going through the decommissioning process and surplus process. Then there are 154 vehicles with less than 100,000 miles. And then you can see there are several more that are over the 100,000 mile mark. Now, out of those vehicles, 243 are specifically assigned to officers in some capacity or another. So you can see the assignment breakdown there, whether it's to investigations, which is a good chunk of it, some to administrative purposes. 67 are assigned in patrol. And then you can see there further. As we look in this last slide of those that are assigned for patrol purposes, 123 vehicles, 58 are pooled vehicles. And 67 are assigned. Now I'm going to show you some information. So that's what the police department did, and then I'm going to show you some information that is actually coming out of the data system. And I am going to caution you all that this was from several months ago before the police scrubbing. So the numbers might be just off slightly as we do some data scrubbing in the system. And Nathan Grove has really, really gone through that system. And I think him and I collectively say that we've got about an 80 to 85% confidence level in the data in our M5 fleet system. But the conclusions of that data are still valid. So here we've stripped out in the system what is deemed specialty vehicles, and that leaves us looking at 405 vehicles. So they're all still there, but where we're going to narrow our focus on vehicle type and model is really on the ones that are more actively used on a day-to-day basis. You can see, and I wanted to kind of draw your attention to the percentage that are utility or the utility hybrid. Because what we've seen over the course of time in between auto and utility is the trend, and this is not just a trend here in the city of Spokane, but it does appear to be a national trend of moving away from sedans for purposes and moving into the utilities. The utility vehicles are certainly more durable. They have higher utilization rates, but they are more costly. So just keep that in mind.
Is that like a K8 essentially when we see on patrol an SUV? That's
a K8 is one of the types of utilities.
Okay,
yes.
Thanks.
Yep. Now here is what the data shows for those vehicles, and I'm just going to draw your attention. You can study this slide on your own when we have more time. Is that the vehicles, and most of these vehicles are older. So this is the average purchase price. This does not include the commission in the upfit. That is over here in this operating cost. So you can see our vehicles are older. So of course they have an average higher operating cost as well. I'm going to skip over motorcycles for now. We only have a few of those.
Is that a typo on pickup?
Yeah.
I was just getting to that, Councilmember Mumm. Yes, so you did notice this. One of the pickups is really the Bearcat. So that was a purchase price of over $300,000, which is throwing this and kind of skewing it. But it is classified as a pickup, which is why it filtered into this group. So don't really look at that so much. That is a little bit skewed because of that heavy-duty pickup that's in there, that heavy-duty truck. And we only have one of those. Just one. This utility here, these are your utilities. They're averaging, and this is the trend I was talking about, where most of these are at least 10 years old, your autos, which are a lot of your Fords. And then you come into your utilities at $31,000. The utility hybrids, although it didn't pull into this is a self-calculating pivot table. The price tags that we have been normally seeing that aren't loaded into the system yet are averaging around $43,000 to $45,000 for a utility hybrid for just the purchase price. So you can see as we move from those older autos into these hybrid utilities, the average price is nearly double what it used to be. And that is a very important point as we work and strategize to build out the police equipment replacement plan. We have to take that trend and that cost figure into account. Now, how is the police department using this? You did see in the previous slide some of the use. This is what is in the system. As for that use, most of it is in patrol. And then this other, you can see the other is here for the neighborhood resource officers, some dedicated traffic control, SWAT, a lot of our specialty units. So very little of it, in fact, just 11% is used for admin and training. The rest of that fleet is really out there in day-to-day operations. Here's a little bit about what that activity is showing in the system. It shouldn't be surprising that for admin investigations, it has the lowest average annual mileage per vehicle. But if you look at patrol, again, not surprising, on average, 12 to 13,000 miles per year. And then training, we have our older vehicles.
Tanya, quick question.
Yes.
On the investigations and admin, are those going towards utilities or are those going to stay in the sedan if under the plan?
That would probably be a better question for Major McNabb. They do have a system, and he could probably answer that much better than I could.
Council President, most of our admin vehicles are K8s. We replaced a couple of them with K8 hybrids this year. We're looking towards more of sticking with 1 or 2 vehicle platforms. We had switched in the past from a few sedans here, a few SUVs there. We're finding that it's better, easier for everybody, including our repair facility, to have just 1 or 2 vehicle platforms to work from.
Is there a reason why investigations and admin would need the SUV? I kind of get it for the patrol, but I don't necessarily. But I don't know the operational needs. So
operational, not necessarily. Some of the larger Tahoe vehicles are good for some of the admin folks to use as a mobile command post. You can get several officers in there at once if you're on a larger incident to. Like I said, if you, instead of hauling out the big old motorhome, it takes an hour or 2 to get out there to set up a hasty command post if need be.
Thanks.
And Michael, let me add real quick too. Traditionally, what we've done is as we've gotten vehicles in, so some of the vehicles would be the unmarked, those are admin vehicles. Admin will usually drive those for a couple years and then rotate those over to investigations as the investigation vehicles age as well. Like I said, a few years back, and my memory is not what it used to be, but one of the challenges is we had the Ford Crown Victoria, Chevy Impalas, we had the K8s, we had just a whole myriad of vehicles. And so one of the discussions we had with Fleet at the time was trying to go to a limited number of vehicles in terms of parts and maintenance. An example, too, and Tanya, forgive me if I'm stealing your thunder here, but when we go to different vehicles, the cost of commissioning go up exponentially. I believe for the hybrids, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but just to commission a hybrid vehicle, did I hear that it's about $30,000, Mike? And a lot of that has to do with we're getting these new vehicles they're not familiar with. The rate is about $125. It's always interfund, but it's $125 per hour. So as they get in new vehicles as well, the costs for commissioning those vehicles are going up rather substantially. Is that accurate, Mike?
Yeah, so we just got the commissioning bill for the first 2 hybrids, and it was nearly double what we were paying for the regular combustion engine vehicle. The explanation was they weren't familiar with the vehicle as much, and it just took longer to figure it all out. So, it's not my understanding that those are not intra-funded. I think that those commissioning costs, Tanya, correct me if I'm wrong, those hit our budget.
Okay.
Yes, the commission costs are part of the total cost, and it is billed to that SIP program as part of the purchase for the vehicle.
So, Tanya, we're going to have to move on a little quicker. How many more slides?
I'm just about done because the rest of it is really to provide some soak time for all of you. We're going to continue to keep revisiting this as we strategize over the next several months. I want to show you from a funding point, and then I'm just going to jump right over to the last 2 documents that you have in your folder. Right now, with their plan, and I've included in your packet a copy of their equipment plan in total. But because of what they have going on in 2021, there is not funding for vehicles with the discontinuance of SIP borrowing in 2021, 22, and 23. There will be no funding really available without strategizing and altering some of their equipment plan for these 3 years involved. Now, what is needed, depending on, we've actually, Nathan Grove kind of ran these scenarios out. If we were to replace vehicles at 100,000 miles, 125,000, or 150,000, these would be the number of vehicles that need to be replaced on that policy basis. But there is not sufficient funding. We're going to keep working on this.
Okay, and I was under the impression that we were talking about using our 1% property tax levy for this, not SIP loans. And Councilmember Mumm, correct me if I'm wrong on that.
I'm not sure if she's clicking, if
She's,
Sorry, I was trying to, and,
okay, fine.
no, no, I'm here.
Okay. Am
I think we need to continue to discuss it.
Yeah, I think we're under a different impression of what we discussed prior and what we're being presented now. So, but go ahead, Tanya.
Well, and that's the whole reason why we are bringing this forward. This is not for a decision. We just want to bring this awareness, and so we can start that robust strategic discussion. So, Claire, should I continue or pause for a question?
I just had a quick question, Tanya. When you come back around, could you pull out, under the truck, could you pull out that Bearcat cost and just make that like a separate item? Since you say it's really skewing those numbers, I would like to see that individual cost. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. So these are just some final points as we continue to work through this. Certainly the older vehicles, the longer we keep them, the more the annual cost to maintain them. And then really recognizing this utility vehicle trend that, again, is not just Spokane. It is nationwide. It is a trend that a lot of police departments are moving towards. And then obviously for the entire equipment plan, there is definitely a need to supplement city funding since it is insufficient. And this is also a very common thing that the police department does get some grant money, but it may not fully cover or meet that gap. So we do need to continue with our strategy discussion. This point is very important in terms of the electrical vehicle moving forward, is that even if we were to replace 15 to 20 gasoline vehicles per year, we have a lot of vehicles. We have 405 vehicles. On average, the complete turnover of the fleet would be done in about 20 to 27 years. This just points to electric vehicles right now are more expensive. Operationally, it will take 5 to 7 years before we can transition the upfront cost into the operational cost savings and maneuver that way. But this is to bring awareness to flip over and turn over a fleet will take a significant amount of time unless it's infused with more funding to turn it over faster. And then certainly on the electric infrastructure, we have limited charging stations, and this is another project for another day. But as we move more forward into that direction, we will have to talk about the electric infrastructure and indoor storage investment that will be needed to fully move into that direction.
I'd like to ask about that indoor storage requirement. Europe doesn't do that. They're outdoor, and they charge their vehicles. They have covers over the charging station and the connection. So I'm not sure where that is coming from on indoor storage.
And you're exactly right, Councilmember. That is something that we need to fully investigate. And that may be a really great option.
I think that this is going to be a study session topic as we move forward, because I know I have a lot of questions. I see Council President has a question, and this is a much bigger topic than just the short amount of time we're allowing here. So, do you want to go ahead, Council President?
Yeah, I won't ask for an answer today. I just was looking for future data, and that is just to get those numbers. We keep each year in the last 7 years, we've added how much money is coming out of the general fund to support capital for police and fire. And I just like to see, and I know we didn't do it this last year because of the pandemic, but assuming we get back to it in future years and replace that increasing rate, and it's an increased, it's not just the same money every year, it's about $1 million additional every year that just builds. And so I'd love to see some analysis on that if we got back on that track, and then to show where all that money, I forget how many millions a year we currently have going in that direction, where that's going, that it wouldn't be there for vehicles. So for another day, though.
Any other questions for Tonya?
Just a comment.
Hey, Tanya.
Wait, hold on, Michael.
No, Michael, go ahead, Mike. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I'm just curious. Do we have any sort of cost-benefit analysis on take-home vehicles? I've heard that perhaps the way that the State Patrol does theirs, particularly on the maintenance side, that they've found more efficiency and perhaps a cost savings relative to us. And I'm just wondering if we've done that analysis to look and see if that's something that might actually be beneficial.
Excellent question. There is a lot of anecdotal information out there that, yes, take-home vehicles, officers do tend to take better care of them. There's also a public safety aspect that people feel warm and fuzzy when they see that car in the neighborhood. And I see Dave Payne is out there. So I'm going to let him speak to this.
Thank you, Ms. Wallace. Councilmember Cathcart. I've actually been working on a take-home vehicle analysis for about the past 6 months. I stopped because I had to move on to other things. So we can probably circle back with that, working with Major McNabb and his people to give you a better understanding. And there's one thing I wanted to point out, on the slide that Ms. Wallace put up about the average annual mileage on I think it was 173 patrol vehicles. That number is a little bit skewed because what you don't see is there are 45 hot-seated vehicles that 3 to 4 shifts run through every day. Those 45 vehicles are averaging 22,500 miles a year. So the life expectancy on those vehicles is 4 to 5 years at the most. And I apologize. I was out sick all last week, so I didn't get a chance to talk to Ms. Wallace. Thank you.
Councilmember Wilkerson, you want to go ahead?
I just wanted to ask, has there been any chatter about electric bikes? I just heard a little comment about that for our offices in the downtown area as we go forward. So just throwing that in the mix, David, and see if it comes up in conversation.
That's a good one. You and I talked about that too, Councilmember. Tanya, I would like to take all the things that we talked about today and create a larger discussion in a study session. I have so many questions, and I know some of the other council members do too, and I think it deserves more time so we can really dig down and explore some options and really get to the bottom of costs and where the money's going to come from. So I appreciate your time today. Let's make a date for another time too, with more time. Okay, Nathan, are you here?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I see you now. Do you want to go ahead and if you could keep it to 5 minutes, you would have my eternal gratitude.
Perfect. Yeah, let's get that done then. So I'm updating everyone on the DERA grant. We applied for it last year. We were unsuccessful in getting an award, so we're trying again this year. And this program essentially is soliciting applications nationwide throughout the EPA's regions for projects that achieve significant reductions in diesel emissions and exposure, specifically diesel emissions. There is criteria for eligible diesel vehicles, school buses, class 5 through 8 heavy-duty highway vehicles, locomotive engines, marine engines, and non-road construction equipment, and their engines as well. So this year we are actually increasing our the amount of funding that we're requesting from the EPA. We are applying for a maximum potential of $1 million in funding to replace between 6 and 9 vehicles, 9 diesel vehicles with new vehicles that have CARB certified engines. These vehicles were already planning to be replaced with or without the grant, so we thought that it would be a perfect opportunity to get some funding to replace those vehicles. We do have the option to replace the vehicles in the grant with electric vehicles, but these vehicles and the requirements for the grant, the electric market has not caught up to the operational duty of each of these vehicles. For example, the vehicles being considered are a flusher truck, a couple of hydro excavators, a 6-wheel flush truck, an F550, a Timco air sweeper, and a backhoe. So these aren't vehicles that we could replace with electrified versions. However, we are going to make sure to replace these vehicles in the grant with CARB certified engines, which is a next step up in environmental efficiency from EPA verified engines. This is due on March 16th, here in a couple of weeks. If we are successful, we'll be notified in between April and May of this year, and funding of the award will come out between June and October of this year. A couple of key details that I want everyone to know. The vehicles being replaced will need to be decommissioned and scrapped, and part of that process is they get cut in half at the frame and holes get drilled into the engine blocks, so those vehicles are essentially rendered useless except for the chassis. And we hope to have the first draft of the application completed by this Friday. That would give us essentially a half week to a week of full review with the grants department as well as our fleet administrative staff here. And essentially the dollars awarded would be credited back to the departments on a percentage level by vehicle cost. That analysis would still need to be done. But I just wanted to let everyone on council know that we are applying for this grant again. And I think we have a really good chance of being successful this time based on the feedback that we heard from EPA from our unsuccessful application last year. Does anyone have any questions?
Questions for Nathan? Go ahead, David.
It's not actually a question for Nathan. I asked him to give me a couple of seconds. Council President Beggs and Councilwoman Kinnear, item 8 that you moved, you took out for today, has a Timco sweeper and a set of plow blades in it. Are you okay with Clint Harris still presenting those this afternoon at the council briefing?
I'll defer to Council President.
Yeah, for the plow blades, just fine. Yep.
The Timco sweeper as well?
Yep, that's fine. Yep.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Any other questions for Nathan? Good enough. Nathan, thanks so much. I appreciate your time.
Of course. Thank you, everyone.
Next up is Treasury Rental Assistance Program discussions with Tim Ziegler. I don't see him on the... There you are. You were hiding. Okay. Good enough. You want to go ahead?
Yes, I am on, but every time I turn my camera on, it freezes, so I just turned it off. I apologize. So with our rental assistance program, if you remember a couple of weeks ago, council approved the department, housing, the HUD, Treasury Rental Assistance Funds, and that was a $6.7 million. That grant is just opened up today for RFP, so we've sent out our information to normal applicants and many others that are on our list served for grants. We then last week on the 25th got information from Department of Commerce on their Treasury fund, so that came through straight from Department of Treasury into Department of Commerce, and that is a total of a little over $9 million that will go towards rental assistance. And so I wanted to talk about that briefly, just to let you know that those funds came in. We've graciously been accepted to put this on the agenda, hopefully later today. We have to have that application in by this Thursday, the 4th, or we'll become ineligible. So time is of the essence for this one. This is only to apply for the funds, not to put them out. So we will have further discussions about what will be in the RFP compared to the current Treasury RFP that just got released today. I just wanted to present that and offer up time if you have any questions about those funds.
Questions for Tim? It looks good, Tim. You're good to go.
Okay. I'll also note that we have $2 million in community development block grant rental assistance that will be going out in another RFP a little bit later this month, but more to come on that.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. And maybe we should do this at the regular meeting, but I just think we all know what the system is, but we may want to mention, and Council President, how people would access it.
Well, I think that will come later.
Right.
We're not there yet.
But just kind of to help people know they're not calling City Hall. They're going somewhere else.
Right. Okay. Councilmember Burke, you are up next with a discussion about SPD community service opportunities within juvenile probation diversion program. That's quite a mouthful. You want to go ahead?
Hi. So I'm not sure why my name's on this.
I don't know. Jacoby decided, I guess, that you would love this to talk about it. Maybe
if there's anybody who can give us
a rundown.
Yeah.
So, Major McNabb, are you still on this call, or Chief Michael?
Councilwoman Kinnear, this is Jackie McConnell.
Oh, good. Jackie, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, what's the question on this?
I remember now. So there was an article that was in the paper, but also Channel 5 did a little article about that juvenile who was arrested at the Black Lives Matter protest and then was given community service with the police department. Are you recalling that?
Yeah, I do.
I just wondered what the policy was behind that, and are these calls that the police department is able to make, and how does that work, and is it given to all juveniles and all of that? I just wondered what the process was on that.
Well, if I recall correctly on this one, council member, the probation actually got a hold of us because they kind of wanted to do something different with this particular juvenile because they felt, I think, that educating him on the system would probably be the best bet for him. So this was actually something, like I said, if I'm recalling this correctly, that probation reached out to us and we worked out with them. And one of the community outreach officers, Officer Greg Butler, has a really good relationship with probation. So that relationship was already there. So I think it was just kind of a comfortable conversation. And the route that this particular incident took was also supported by the parents. Does that make sense?
It does. I'm just wondering, why aren't these opportunities, pushed forward for other individuals? And it just seems a little like we were able to pick and choose on this situation. And this particular instance, this individual was able to just go on a community service expedition with the police department. I don't know. I just wanted to make sure we have equity in what we're practicing, and that we're not picking and choosing. And I don't know. It just seemed a little bit off to me. And I understand if it's totally not on your shoulders and it was on the other side, the probation side, I'm happy to reach out to them. But I just wanted to see if there was a policy on that you guys had or anything like that.
No policy. And so, like I said, if I recall correctly, it was probation that reached out to us. So this wasn't like a hand-picked police thing. It was something that we worked with probation as to what we thought, or they thought, just a mutual agreement on what we were looking for an outcome per se. And really that's them, because they're the ones who have to be okay with whatever service the juvenile is going to do. But, to your point with equity, we are trying to work on some other programs with probation to where maybe some other kids that are in the system could be involved in programs like this.
Okay. Well, that'd be great to get an update on that if you guys move forward. Would you be able to connect me to somebody in the probation office that I could chat with about this by chance?
Yeah, I will find out a name and I will send it off to you.
That would be so great. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you, Jackie. Appreciate that. We have little time left. Councilmember Stratton, you requested a cold case action plan discussion. I don't know if we have an action plan yet. Did you want to elaborate?
Councilmember Kinnear, I just wanted to bring this up. I'll take 2 minutes. I think we all are aware, and just recently, the last 2 or 3 council meetings, we're getting people within the public that are requesting we look at some kind of a cold case team or something like that. And so I'm just putting it out there, hoping maybe for future discussions that we can talk, or if there is a plan with the department on how we handle these cold cases. And if, you know, I mean, I've just been kind of starting to read on things, but there are, you know, ways that some communities will bring back retired police officers to work some of these cases. I don't know, but I know that it's touched a lot of us to hear this testimony on Monday nights. And so I just want it out there that hopefully we can move forward with some kind of a discussion, or if there is a plan. I don't want to put the chief on the spot right now, but I think that we're hearing so much about it. I just want to.
Yeah, let's put him on the spot right now. That's a good idea. Chief Meidel, you talked about this a little bit, and you are going after a grant. You need a detective and a sergeant, if I recall, to pursue this. And if you could just give us like a 2-minute recap, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. And Major McNabb put together a great PowerPoint to cover this as well. If we don't have time, we will save that for another day. We're absolutely interested in exploring a cold case unit. A lot of it's going to come down to what does that cold case unit look like. So if you start calling in individuals from outside, because of the databases they're going to have access to, typically for most of those databases, they're going to have to be commissioned. WSP requires and the FBI requires that they actually work full-time for the police department. You obviously want to make sure you get someone that has good background in investigations as well. So you're going to have to really look at someone who has prior investigative experience and that wants to come back. So, you know, one of the things we talked about was do we hire someone part-time to come back and work these cases? That's one of the things we'll have to discuss with the guild as well, because there's those potential skimming issues. And the reality is we have over 100 cold cases. So is it more feasible to do it with a part-time temp seasonal, or would it make more sense to actually hire full-time staff to work those cases? There's certainly enough for them to work. So there's a couple different options that we're exploring. And go ahead.
No, I'm just sorry about that. I'm talking to myself here, but I did.
So yeah, we're moving forward with exploring that as well. And we will hopefully have more information in the next week or so what that may look like.
And I think this is kind of an ongoing discussion, not just the plan, but as the opportunity to hire people to execute that plan. So I think this is going to be a discussion for weeks as we go forward. So please keep us in the loop. Does that help, Councilmember Stratton?
It does. I just wanted to get it out there because it's hard to listen to that every Monday. And I just want people to know that we care and that we want to move something forward and keep talking about it.
Yes, great. I think we're all on the same page. Go ahead, Councilmember Munn.
Yeah, we should probably, Councilmember Cathcart, we haven't had an opportunity to update everyone on the discussions we've been having and the request we made of Chief Meidel.
So more to come. Next up, last up is Councilmember Mumm, and you're going to be talking about COVID, a plan, outreach plan going forward. And we have Mike Lopez that can help us with this discussion. Do you want to go ahead first, Councilmember, and then he can fill in?
Right. We've been trying as a city to find the ways that we can take leadership with COVID vaccinations, and the answer, one of the answers could lie right here with our wonderful staff, with firefighters. And Chief Schaefer has been in discussions with other fire leaders about how they could actually bring it to folks in their homes and in our community. So I'm really excited to tee up and hear and see this presentation from fire.
Well, thank you, Councilmember Mumm. Mike Lopez with the Spokane Fire Department. I'm going to try to share my screen. Please let me know if you can see.
Not yet. There we go.
Okay. So I prepared 4 quick slides to provide some context to what we'll be talking talking about, and I will be quick in the interest of time. The current program that we have is a partnership with the Spokane Regional Health District, and in terms of the details of how we reach out to the community and provide support to the community in terms of vaccinating community is really dependent upon the Regional Health District as the lead. I can tell you that in our 2 phases of the phase 1A and ultimately phase 1B vaccination clinics that we conducted out here at the Fire Training Center, that partnership was nothing short of outstanding. They were very responsive, they were supportive. The Regional Health District actually provided the vaccine as the Washington State Department of Health approved vaccination program. And what we were able to accomplish is putting together the model that can deliver that vaccine in a number of different ways. So obviously the first thing is that we need to continue our partnership with the Spokane Regional Health District. They are the lead, and we will support them as we move forward. And as any partnership goes, we have actually been able to establish quite an effective dialogue in terms of where we go next steps. Future vaccination efforts are dependent upon the concurrence of the Regional Health District as the lead, but also, more importantly, the availability of the vaccine product, which we did use Moderna during the phase 1 and phase 2 vaccination drive-through clinic. There's also Pfizer available, and as we know, soon Johnson & Johnson will be available. Vaccine availability, the product availability, has become a concern with colleagues throughout the state that I've spoken with. From a staffing perspective, the Regional Health District would provide support staff. EMS can provide the vaccinators. Our paramedics and EMTs are very capable of administering the vaccines, as we have demonstrated. And again, that partnership bodes well for the community. There is obviously, as we go forward, cost of staffing. So as we use paramedics and EMTs to serve as vaccinators, there's a need for recognizing that there might be that overtime cost. So one of the things that I'm monitoring is the availability of funds as Congress goes through the appropriation of funds specific to COVID-19 and relief. And then also location becomes a challenge, although we found it not to be a challenge with our drive-through clinic. It has to be suitable for environmental and weather conditions. So to put some context to this whole answer to your question, Councilmember Mumm, the vaccination clinic model that we developed is quite successful, and we've actually had communities reach out to us to say, could we share our model with them because they saw the efficacy early on. The model is replicable. Obviously, it's scalable. So we endeavored to vaccinate upwards of 3,000 plus people when we started this project out, and so we built it so that it could be scalable. So we could take this to a neighborhood center, if you will, and do a small vaccination clinic, again, in conjunction with the Regional Health District. So it can be applied to large clinics or small pop-up clinics. So I just want to recap to kind of demonstrate that we do have a program that's efficacious. During our 2 phases of first responder vaccination clinics, we administered a total of 5,290 doses of Moderna vaccine. When we initially started, it was the phase 1A first responders, and we quickly were able to demonstrate to the Regional Health District that we could handle far more, and so they expanded the availability of our clinic to initially other healthcare providers that were working in essential direct contact with people who could be COVID positive, And subsequent to that, when the state moved to phase 1B, which is adults 65 years and older or people 50 years and older living in multi-generational families, they actually expanded the availability of their appointment schedule to those individuals as well. To the point where at the end of the phase 2, well, actually the last 6 days of the phase 2, they were scheduling appointments in 1-minute intervals, which was really fantastic. Kept our people really busy. We did fully vaccinate 1,060 first responders, and 2,752 people in our community were fully vaccinated through our drive-through clinic. This really is a demonstration of how we as a community can come together. We had over a dozen agencies who were present, either administering the vaccine, serving as scribes, greeters, post-vaccination staging, monitoring, et cetera. And again, as I said, it served as a model for other communities in the state. And actually, the Department of Homeland Security actually sent a representative from Washington, D.C., one of their higher-ups, to come out and observe us during the last 4 days of our drive-through clinic that ended in February, because they were trying to figure out how to vaccinate a large population of their employees back in Washington, D.C. He came out and observed that and then asked for our program. And then, as you all well know, we were successful despite numerous weather events. We dealt with snow, as you can see. The bottom left-hand corner picture is actually one of the fir trees that was out here at the training center during the windstorm that decided to become a sail and got uprooted. We had driving rain on several days, and then the last 3 days of the clinic, we were dealing with 0 or sub-zero wind chill temperatures, and we had to adjust and modify, but it was very successful. In terms of future vision, we will continue to collaborate with the Spokane Regional Health District. We're going to look at to identify opportunities, and really they're all out there. We have a need to do another additional first responder phase 1A vaccination. We have a number of folks who did not qualify to receive the vaccine because they had been COVID positive for the previous 90 days. So basically anybody who became COVID positive after October 7th was precluded from receiving the vaccine at that time. So we've got to ramp that up. Our CARES team worked very diligently in late January and reached out to all of their clients, largely those folks who were homebound, who are our median age of a CARES client is 70 years old and immobile, yet they are getting home services brought in, so they are exposed. So we're going to work with the Regional Health District to potentially do a home visit type of clinic where we would create a, for lack of better terms, a caravan, a vaccinating paramedic or EMT followed by somebody who can sit with the individual for 15 minutes and monitor them to make sure they're not having a severe allergic reaction and be able to take care of them. And then we're going to continuously monitor progress to future vaccination stages, phase 2 and 2A and 2B, because we believe that we can support the Regional Health District in this. So with that, I'll conclude my presentation and unshare my screen and would be happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Mom, could you're going to say what I'm going to say, so I'd love to hear from you.
Well, I want to know what we can do to help you stand this up, because we know that Spokane County actually has a higher than average utilization rate in the state. I mean, we want to get vaccinated. I see this sort of like the bookmobile, got the Vaxmobile that can get out there into the community for folks who maybe are, have transportation barriers or health barriers. And we know that all the vaccinations, they're not just sitting in a stockpile somewhere on the west side. They've been sent to all the counties. So for us to get more vaccinations, we have to actually ask another county to give up their vaccinations for us. That's just not right. So we have to wait until the next shipments come in. No amount of political pressure on our part is going to get any vaccinations in here any faster, but what we can do is be ready and support the delivery of this quicker. So maybe later it'll come to you, but is there anything that we can do to help prepare for this, to get this model going?
Before you answer, I just want to add on. I don't feel like the city has really promoted this enough. You're saying that the health district is the lead on this, but I feel like they're living in a cave, been in a vacuum, because I've heard nothing about this. If other council members have, then I will back off and say, not me, I'm not paying attention, but I have heard nothing about this from the health district. I would like to take more of have more of a voice in letting people know this is happening.
Well, those are great observations. And again, I don't know that I'm fully prepared to provide a pertinent answer right now, an accurate answer, if you will. The one thing that I will say is that I truly believe that the model that we have available to us can be scaled and implemented. And I think the one thing that needs to be clearly understood is that doesn't come without a cost. However, that being said, I think that we are prepared because things like the CARES team, we know where those people are. It's just a matter of once we can get the concurrence and get the vaccine in, we are ready to press the go button. Some of the things that have been discussed, obviously not in great detail, is the potential for us to do many pop-up clinics in community or in neighborhoods. For example, we could use a fire station, and I'm not saying every fire station, but there are some fire stations that could potentially accommodate the footprint that's needed to be able to deliver vaccines to specific communities or neighborhoods. Again, going out to our neighborhood centers and doing something along that line. I think that the fire department can provide some support. The nice thing about our partnership with the Regional Health District is that they can provide the support staff. When we look at the model that we created, we have greeters. They don't need to be clinicians. We have scribes that don't need to be clinicians, yet those are very essential pieces of this model or this machine that we put together. So I think that we can, as more vaccine becomes available, believe me, I've lived COVID for the last 14 months, and I'm so excited about the vaccine that I will continue to be very engaged with the Regional Health District. In terms of not knowing about that, I take full responsibility for that. I probably should have done a better job of socializing internally so that we can bring everybody up to speed on what we were doing. So.
I would just say, no, it's not up to you to do that. I think, we've got some really good folks who know how to promote things within the city. And I would like to be more of an administration-driven, let's get the word out, let's be that other face, not just the health department, but the city, be that other face that says, here's what's happening, here's what we're doing, and tell people what's going on. So I know Councilmember Wilkerson, you had a comment, and then we're going to have to close it down.
Thank you. I just want to comment that really there is a lot of activity going on at the health district. They are busy. Again, it's access to the vaccine, and then starting today, vaccines will be going directly to CVS, Safeway, Albertsons, Rosars. So a lot of that is happening outside of the health district. So in partnership, but there is activity and they are promoting it as they have the vaccine. We found out there's nothing worse than telling the vaccine's coming and the vaccine doesn't get here. So we are just trying to manage vaccine expectations as we go forward and still be in our phase. I think we're in 2A at this point in time. So Mike, I look forward to, I was very excited about the opportunity of going to people's homes who are homebound to get them vaccinated. That will be just like really the best thing we could do because there are a lot of our seniors and disabled folks who will never be able to get out to one of these clinics or to a healthcare place. So thank you.
Mike, thanks for giving us that presentation. It was informative. We appreciate it. And we're going to have to cut it off here because we are so over time. Councilmember Mumm, can you just really quickly tell us what happened at the legislative piece that we didn't talk about earlier?
Right. So earlier today, one of our key pieces of legislation that we have been asking for the state to look at did pass the House by a wide margin, and will go on to the Senate. It's House Bill 1155. And we want to thank all of the supporters, firefighters, state firefighters groups, and all the professionals in the firefighting field for stepping up and saying that we want to put public safety first and give our community the right to have a voice at the table about how their tax dollars are spent for the 911 dollars. So we look forward to that to be discussed in the Senate, and we will continue to share information with our lawmakers who, from the 6th District who testified today. We want to and have been reaching out to them to try to share. So they have all the information that we have about how we can keep the community safe. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Okay, folks, this is it. The next meeting is going to be March 29th because we have spring break the first week of April. So we have 2 of these. And I'm going to try very hard not to make it this long next time. I appreciate all of you sticking with us throughout the whole meeting. Chief Meidel, thank you. And all the other presenters, thanks so much. Appreciate your time. And we will see you at 3:30 at our briefing. So until then, ta-ta, and we'll see you soon.